After losing my parents, my sisters left me in foster care. Then my girlfriend tried to bring them back in my life, and now they all want my help. When I was 10, my mom passed away. It was sudden, and there wasn't much time to process what was happening. One day, she was there, and the next, she wasn't. It was a car accident. I remember sitting in the waiting room at the hospital while the nurses spoke in hushed tones. My sisters, Kylie and Danielle, were both there, but they didn't seem as shaken as I was. Maybe it was because they were older, or maybe it was because they had already started pulling away from our family by then. Kylie was 23 and busy with her new job, and Danielle at 19 was starting college. I was just a kid, and suddenly everything I knew about stability and family was gone. At the funeral, I expected my sisters to step up. I mean, they were adults. Kylie had her own apartment, and Danielle was sharing a dorm with a couple of friends. I figured one of them would take me in or at least offer to. But instead, I overheard them talking about arrangements. That's how I learned I wasn't going to stay with either of them. The social worker who showed up the next week confirmed it. She was nice enough, but all I could focus on was the fact that my sisters didn't want me. They gave excuses, of course. Kylie said she wasn't ready to be a full-time guardian. Danielle claimed she couldn't juggle school and raising a kid. I didn't know what to say back then. I was just a scared kid who'd lost his mom. But the way they avoided eye contact when they talked to me said it all. They weren't interested in taking on that responsibility. I was shuffled into the foster care system without much fanfare. Kylie signed some papers, patted me on the shoulder, and said she'd visit. Spoiler alert, she didn't. Foster care was a mixed bag. I ended up in a decent home eventually, but it took a while to get there. My first placement was with a family that saw me as a paycheck. They didn't hit me or anything, but they were distant. Meals were served on time. The fridge was stocked, but the house always felt cold. My foster parents didn't talk to me unless it was necessary, and they had two older kids who made it clear I wasn't part of their little family. I spent most of my time alone, sitting in my room with my mom's old photo album. It was one of the few things I'd managed to take with me. The phone calls started a couple of months after I was placed. At first, I was excited to hear from Kylie and Danielle. I thought maybe they regretted their decision and would change their minds, but the calls were awkward. They'd ask generic questions. How's school? Are you eating enough? And then there'd be long pauses. They never really listened to my answers. After a while, I stopped looking forward to their calls. It felt like they were doing it out of obligation, not because they actually cared. One time when I was 12, I got brave and asked Kylie why she didn't take me in. She sighed like I was being unreasonable and said, I was just starting my career. It wasn't the right time. Danielle gave a similar excuse when I asked her. I had no idea how to raise a kid, she said. It wouldn't have been fair to either of us. At the time, I didn't know how to argue back, but their words stuck with me. It wasn't about fairness. It was about the fact that they didn't want me. As the years went by, I learned not to expect much from my family. Calls became less frequent, dropping from once a month to a couple of times a year. I stopped trying to engage with them and gave short answers to their questions. Yeah. School's fine. No. I don't need anything. Thanks for calling, I guess. Eventually, they stopped calling altogether, and I didn't care. By the time I was 15, I hated them. All of them. My sisters, my aunts, my uncles, they were all the same. They didn't care about me when it mattered, so why should I care about them? The foster family I ended up with when I was 14 was better, though. They weren't perfect, but they tried. My foster mom, Mrs. Clark, was patient, and Mr. Clark treated me like one of his own kids. They had two younger kids, and while we weren't super close, they didn't treat me like an outsider. For the first time in years, I felt like I had some kind of stability. I stayed with them until I turned 18, and I'm grateful for what they did for me. But even then, I couldn't shake the bitterness I felt toward my own family. Every holiday, every birthday, I'd wonder why no one had fought for me. Why didn't anyone think I was worth it? When I turned 20, I decided I was done. My sisters had tried reaching out a couple of times, but I ignored their calls. I didn't want their apologies or their excuses. I was tired of being the kid they abandoned. So I packed my things, left town, and didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't even leave a note. I wanted a fresh start, a life where I wasn't defined by what my family did or didn't do. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I moved to a new city, got a job, and started building a life for myself. I didn't tell anyone my full story. When people asked about my family, I'd just say, we're not close, and change the subject. It was easier that way. No one needed to know about the years I spent feeling like I wasn't enough. Looking back, I don't know if I'll ever forgive my sisters. Maybe they thought they were doing the right thing, or maybe they were just selfish. Either way, they made their choice, and I made mine. All I knew was that I wasn't going to let their neglect define me anymore. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own life, and that was enough for me. Starting over at 20 felt freeing, but also terrifying. I packed everything I owned into a beat-up duffel bag and caught a bus to a city I'd only seen on TV. I didn't know anyone there, but that was the point. I wanted a clean slate where no one knew me as the kid who got left behind. I didn't have much of a plan, just enough money to get by for a couple of weeks and a vague idea that I'd figure things out as I went. The first few months were rough. I stayed in a cheap hostel while I looked for work, eating instant noodles most days and stretching every dollar. I'd pick up odd jobs, dishwashing, unloading trucks, cleaning offices, just to keep the lights on. I barely slept, partly because the hostel was noisy, but mostly because I couldn't stop thinking about whether I'd made the right choice. Was it stupid to cut ties with everyone and start from scratch? But every time I thought about reaching out to my sister, I'd remember those awkward calls, the excuses, and the way they let me down when I needed them most. That was enough to keep me moving forward. Eventually, things started to click. I landed a job at a small coffee shop, the kind of place where the regulars knew your name and tipped in crumpled dollar bills. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. And the owner, Mrs. Patel, took a liking to me. She reminded me a bit of Mrs. Clark, my last foster mom. Kind, but no nonsense. She'd nag me about eating more vegetables and staying out of trouble, which I secretly appreciated. It had been a long time since anyone cared enough to do that. Working at the coffee shop gave me a sense of stability I hadn't felt in years. I started making friends with some of the regulars, like Alex, who ran the bookstore next door, and Lisa, a student who always came in with her nose in a textbook. For the first time in forever, I felt like I had a community. No one asked about my past, and I didn't offer any details. They just knew me as the guy who made a killer latte and always had a joke ready. It was enough. At 22, things got even better. That's when I met Sarah. She came into the coffee shop one rainy afternoon, soaked to the bone and looking like she'd had the worst day ever. Her umbrella had broken, and she was running late for a meeting, but she still stopped to order a chai latte. When I handed it to her, she smiled and said, "Thanks for not judging me for looking like a drowned rat." I laughed and said, "Hey. You're the best dressed drowned rat I've seen all day." She rolled her eyes, but I could tell she was amused. Sarah started coming in more often after that. And before long, we were chatting every time she stopped by. She was 30, a little older than me, and worked as a graphic designer. She had this easy confidence about her. She knew exactly who she was and didn't care what anyone else thought. It was refreshing, especially since I'd spent so much of my life feeling like I had to prove myself to people who didn't care anyway. After a few weeks, I worked up the nerve to ask her out. To my surprise, she said yes. Our first date was simple. We grabbed burgers from a food truck and walked around the park. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told me about her childhood, growing up as an only child with parents who adored her, and how she'd always dreamed of traveling the world. I told her about working at the coffee shop and my dream of one day opening my own place. I didn't tell her much about my family, though. I just said we weren't close and left it at that. Sarah didn't push for details, which I appreciated. She seemed to understand that I wasn't ready to talk about it, and she respected that. At least in the beginning, our relationship moved quickly. By the time we'd been dating a year, we were talking about moving in together. I'd saved up enough to get out of the hostel and into a tiny apartment, but Sarah's place was nicer. So I ended up moving in with her. It felt strange at first, living with someone who was so close to their family. Her parents would call every few days just to chat, and she'd tell them everything. What we'd had for dinner, what movies we'd watched, even small stuff like the new coffee shop we'd tried. I wasn't used to that kind of openness. "You need to move out," I told her. "Take as much time as you need, but I want you gone." She cried harder, begging me to reconsider, but my mind was made up. Trust is everything in a relationship. And once it's broken, there's no going back. At least not for me. The next few days were a blur. Sarah moved out of our apartment, taking her things one box at a time. I tried to avoid being there while she packed. It was too painful to watch, even though I knew I'd done the right thing. Her parents started calling me, which only made things worse. They left voicemail after voicemail saying Sarah was heartbroken and didn't understand why I was being so harsh. They argued that she had good intentions and didn't deserve to be punished for one mistake. But it wasn't just one mistake. It was a betrayal of trust. And if they couldn't understand that, there was no point in trying to explain it. I blocked their numbers too. One night, about a week after Sarah moved out, I sat on the couch staring at the empty space where a bookshelf used to be. I felt this weird mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief. Part of me missed her, but another part of me was glad she was gone. I couldn't shake the feeling that this breakup was inevitable, that sooner or later, her idea of family and mine were bound to clash. Looking back, I think Sarah genuinely believed she was helping me. She thought she was fixing something that was broken, but what she didn't understand is that some things don't need fixing. Some things are better left alone. I didn't need closure with my sisters. I didn't need to forgive them or have a heart-to-heart. All I needed was the peace that came from knowing I was in control of my own life. Sarah couldn't see that. And in the end, That's what drove us apart. After Sarah moved out, I thought things would settle down. I was wrong. If anything, the drama just ramped up. Sarah's parents kept trying to get involved. Even though I'd blocked their numbers, they found ways to get messages to me. One time, they showed up at the coffee shop while I was working. I had no idea they'd come until Mrs. Patel came to the back and told me, "There's a couple asking for you." They seem upset. My heart sank. I already knew who it was. When I walked out to the front, there they were, Sarah's mom and dad, looking like they'd just stepped off a suburban family postcard. Her mom had tears in her eyes, and her dad looked ready to give me a lecture. "We just want to talk," her dad said as soon as he saw me. I sighed. "I'm at work. This isn't the time or place." "Well, you haven't given us much of a choice," her mom said, her voice trembling. "You blocked our numbers, and Sarah is devastated. You won't even hear her out." "There's nothing to hear," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "She broke my trust. End of story." Her dad stepped forward, clearly trying to intimidate me. "Do you know how much she's been crying? She made a mistake, but she didn't do it out of malice. She cares about you, and she was only trying to help." I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the frustration bubbling inside me. "Look," I said. "I'm sorry she's hurting, but that doesn't change what happened. I made my boundaries clear, and she ignored them. That's not something I can just get over." "But you're throwing away years of a relationship over one incident," her mom said, almost pleading now. "She's in therapy, you know. She's trying to understand why she did what she did. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It doesn't change what she did," I replied. "I need you to leave now. I'm not discussing this any further." Mrs. Patel must have sensed the tension because she came out from the back and gently but firmly told them they needed to leave. I felt bad that she had to get involved, but I was grateful she had my back. As they left, her dad muttered something about me being cold and ungrateful. I just shook my head and went back to work. That wasn't the end of it, though. Sarah herself started sending me letters. At first, I ignored them. I didn't even open the first few, just tossed them in the trash. But one day, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened one. In the letter, she apologized again for what she'd done. She said she regretted crossing my boundaries and wished she could take it back. But she also doubled down on her reasoning, saying she still believed I needed to confront my past. "I just wanted you to have the chance to heal," she wrote. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was trying to help." Reading that letter made me angrier than I thought it would. It wasn't that she was apologizing, that part was fine. But the way she kept framing it as if she knew better than me about my own life, that made my blood boil. She didn't understand that her version of help was the exact opposite of what I needed. I didn't respond to her letters. I didn't see the point. It was clear we were never going to see eye to eye on this, and dragging it out would just make things worse. I focused on work, on rebuilding my routine without her. Some days were easier than others. There were moments when I'd think about texting her or calling her just to see how she was doing, but I knew better. Once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to fix. Around this time, my sister started trying to contact me more persistently. Blocking Kylie's number hadn't been enough. They found me on social media too. I deleted my accounts years ago, but apparently, Kylie had gotten Danielle involved, and Danielle wasn't blocked yet. I got a message from her that just said, "We need to talk." I deleted it without replying, but the message lingered in my head for days. What did they want? Why now? I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's meddling had opened a door I'd worked hard to keep closed. It made me resent her all over again, even though I knew I was the one who had to deal with it now. Eventually, I decided to send Danielle one last message. It was short and to the point. "I'm not interested in talking. Please stop contacting me." I blocked her immediately after sending it. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong again. One night, I was sitting in my apartment when I got a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before opening it. When I finally did, I was stunned to see Kylie standing there. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice cold. "I just want to talk," she said, holding her hands up like she was surrendering. "Can I come in?" "No," I said flatly. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." She looked taken aback, but nodded. "Look, I know you're mad at me and Danielle. I get it. We should have done more when Mom died. We screwed up, but we've been trying to make it right, and you keep shutting us out." I crossed my arms. "You had 10 years to make it right. Why now?" She hesitated. "We didn't know how to reach you. And then Sarah reached out. She told us what happened, and it got us thinking. We just want a chance to fix things." Hearing her say her name felt like a punch to the gut. "Sarah had no right to get involved," I said through gritted teeth. "And you have no right to show up here uninvited. I've made it clear I don't want to talk to you." Kylie's face fell, but I didn't care. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for everything. I miss my little brother." "You should have thought about that before you abandoned him," I said. Then I shut the door in her face. That night, I couldn't sleep. Seeing Kylie brought back memories I'd tried to bury, memories of being a scared, lonely kid, wondering why no one wanted him. It reminded me why I'd cut ties in the first place. Some people don't deserve second chances. After Kylie showed up at my door, I knew I had to make some changes. Blocking numbers and ignoring messages wasn't enough anymore. My family had a way of creeping back in. No matter how clear I made it that I didn't want anything to do with them, it felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next message or knock at the door. I hated feeling that way, like I wasn't fully in control of my own life. The first thing I did was talk to my landlord. I explained the situation, leaving out some details, and asked if there was any way I could get out of my lease early. He wasn't thrilled, but after I offered to cover a month's rent as a penalty, he agreed. I started looking for a new place immediately, focusing on neighborhoods farther from where Kylie might think to look. Within a week, I found a small studio apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And most importantly, it was a fresh start. Packing up my old place was bittersweet. As much as I wanted to leave, this apartment had been my first real home after foster care. It was where I'd started rebuilding my life piece by piece. It was where I met Sarah, where I'd thought for a while that I could finally have something stable. Leaving it felt like leaving behind a chapter of my life, one that had been both painful and hopeful in its own way. The move helped more than I expected. Being in a new place with new surroundings gave me a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts at the coffee shop and saving up for the future. Mrs. Patel noticed I was working harder than usual and pulled me aside one day. "You okay?" she asked, her eyes full of concern. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just keeping busy." She didn't push, but I could tell she didn't fully believe me. Still, her kindness meant a lot. It reminded me that not all relationships had to be complicated or painful. Some people just cared because they wanted to. No strings attached. Sarah, of course, didn't give up right away. Even after moving, I got a couple more letters from her, forwarded to my new address. I didn't bother opening them. I knew whatever she had to say wouldn't change anything. I'd made my decision, and I wasn't going to second guess it. I kept telling myself that trust was the foundation of any relationship, and once it's broken, there's no going back. It was hard, though. Some nights, I'd lie awake thinking about the good times we'd had and wondering if I'd been too harsh. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. What she'd done wasn't just a mistake. It was a fundamental disregard for who I was and what I needed. As for my sisters, I didn't hear from them again after Kylie's visit. Whether they'd finally gotten the message or were just waiting for the right moment to try again, I didn't know. And, honestly, I didn't care. The more time passed, the more I realized how much lighter I felt without them in my life. I wasn't carrying around that anger and resentment anymore, not because I'd forgiven them, but because I'd finally accepted that I didn't need them. Their opinions, their guilt trips, their attempts to reconnect, none of it mattered. I was done letting them have power over me. One day, about 6 months after Sarah and I broke up, I got an email from an old friend I hadn't talked to in years. It was someone I'd met during my time in foster care, a guy named Marcus. He'd been a couple of years older than me, and we'd lost touch after he aged out of the system. Seeing his name in my inbox was a surprise, but a welcome one. In his email, Marcus said he'd recently moved to my city and was working as a mechanic. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime and catch up. I hesitated at first. Letting someone from my past back into my life felt risky, especially after everything that had happened. But Marcus wasn't like my family or Sarah. He knew what it was like to grow up without a safety net, to feel like you had to figure everything out on your own. So I replied and set up a time to meet. Seeing Marcus again was like stepping back into a world I'd almost forgotten. We talked for hours, sharing stories about our foster families and laughing about the dumb stuff we used to do as kids. He told me about his struggles trying to find stable work after aging out and how he'd finally landed on his feet. I told him about my job at the coffee shop and my dream of one day opening my own place. At one point, Marcus leaned back in his chair and said, "You've done good for yourself, man. I'm proud of you." It caught me off guard. I wasn't used to hearing that from anyone, let alone someone who knew the darker parts of my past, but it meant a lot, more than I could put into words. Over the next few months, Marcus and I became close friends again. Having someone who understood my past, who didn't judge or try to fix me, was a game changer. He reminded me that family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who show up for you when it counts. With Marcus' encouragement, I started thinking seriously about my future. I'd been saving up for years. And while I wasn't anywhere near ready to open my own coffee shop, the dream didn't feel as far off as it used to. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something real, something that was entirely mine. Looking back, cutting ties with Sarah and my sisters was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but it was also one of the best. It taught me the importance of boundaries, of standing up for what I need and not letting anyone guilt me into compromising that. I don't regret the choices I made, even though they were painful. They brought me to where I am now, a place where I can finally start moving forward. As for my family, I wish them well, but I don't need them in my life. I've learned that some relationships aren't worth saving, and that's okay. Not every story needs a happy ending. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away and focus on building the life you deserve. My instinct was always to keep things to myself. Sarah was patient with me, though. She'd invite me to family dinners and holidays. And while I felt like an outsider at first, her parents went out of their way to make me feel welcome. Her dad was the kind of guy who could strike up a conversation with anyone, and her mom always made enough food to feed an army. It was nice, but it also made me feel a little off. Like, I was getting a glimpse of something I'd never had and probably never would. After a while, Sarah started bringing up the idea of reconnecting with my family. "Don't you think it would be nice to have them in your life again?" she asked one night as we were eating dinner. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Not really," I said. She looked surprised. "But they're your family," she said. Like, that was supposed to mean something. I told her I didn't want to talk about it, and she dropped it. Or at least, I thought she did. Looking back, I think Sarah genuinely believed she was helping. She grew up in this tight-knit supportive family, so I don't think she could understand why anyone would want to cut ties with their own blood. To her, family was everything. But to me, family was just a reminder of all the times I'd been let down. For a while, things were good. Sarah stopped bringing up my family, and I let myself believe she'd finally understood where I was coming from. We started talking about the future. Marriage, kids, maybe even buying a house someday. It felt like we were building something solid, something I could rely on. For the first time, I thought maybe I'd finally found my happy ending. But as I'd soon learn, some things aren't as solid as they seem. It started with a text message. I didn't recognize the number, so I almost ignored it. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The message said something like, "Hey, it's been a long time. I know this is out of the blue, but I'd really like to catch up." The name at the bottom stopped me cold, Kylie, my oldest sister. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake or spam. Kylie wouldn't reach out after all these years. Right? But as I read the message again, it was clear she knew exactly who she was talking to. She mentioned a few things only my sister would know, stuff about our mom and the neighborhood we grew up in. My stomach sank. How did she get my number? I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to throw my phone across the room, and another part of me wanted to call her and scream. But in the end, I didn't do either. I just blocked the number. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Later that night, I brought it up to Sarah. "You won't believe who texted me today," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. She looked up from her laptop, curious. "Who?" "Kylie. My sister," I said. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of shock or concern, she gave me this weird guilty look. "Oh," she said softly. "I was going to tell you about that." I froze. "Tell me about what?" She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "I gave her your number," she admitted. It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. "You what?" I just thought she started, but I cut her off. "You thought what?" "That I wouldn't notice? That it was okay to completely ignore everything I've told you about my family? I thought maybe if you talk to him, you'd realize it's not as bad as you think," she said, her voice defensive now. "You've been holding on to this anger for so long, and I just wanted to help you move past it." "Help me?" I snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You had no right." Her face crumpled, but I didn't care. I couldn't believe she'd gone behind my back like this, especially after all the times I told her how I felt about my family. I thought she understood. I thought she respected my boundaries. Clearly, I was wrong. She tried to explain herself, saying she only wanted to help and that she didn't mean any harm. But to me, it didn't matter what her intentions were. She crossed a line and I couldn't look past it. "I can't do this," I told her finally. "We're done." Her eyes widened. "You're breaking up with me over this?" "It's not just this," I said. "It's the fact that you don't respect me enough to listen. I told you how I felt, and you went behind my back anyway. I can't be with someone who thinks they know better than me about my own life." She started crying, which only made me angrier. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, let's talk about this. We can fix it," but I didn't want to talk anymore. I'd said everything I needed to say.